Hey guys, what's going on? It's EagleOwl-Hunter, and even though I had to spill the fact that unfortunately I won't be able to make videos for a little while, I figured even though I'm not feeling well, I can give you guys something. So I thought it would be a fun idea to give you the origin stories of my characters, because individually I've done 5 characters. I've done Mad Hatter, Rougarou, which Rougarou is still going on. Like, those two right there are my 2 most popular characters. I did a country boy. I did Cheshire, who was involved in the Yandere series. And basically, my 5th character was me. I told the story of my personal health issues that I went through in the past. So I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to listen to that ASMR. But for now, let's just talk about the 2 main characters, Mad Hatter and Rougarou. And the origin stories for these guys are more or less going to be, they're extremely similar in the fact that yes, they're both yanderes, but they're also extremely different in the reason why they have this yandere personality. Like, Rougarou is explained a little bit more, and we'll go into more detail about him later, but as of right now, I want to focus on my first yandere character, who was the Mad Hatter. Now, the origin of Mad Hatter is, he's based off of the 2010 movie Alice in Wonderland. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's a pretty good movie. It's about Alice returning as, what was she, a teenager at this point? Maybe a young adult? I'm not sure. But she returns to Wonderland, and Wonderland is ruined. So she comes back, and basically she saves Wonderland from the Red Queen, the Jabberwocky. I don't want to spoil the entire movie for you, so I'll just say that, I suppose, even though I probably already did spoil it. Sorry. But the Hatter, even though Alice already saved Wonderland, he's still, in his mind, seeing Wonderland as this dried up, decaying wasteland. Like, he's suffering from schizophrenia. And that's pretty much where he can't tell what's real and what isn't real. So what he's seeing in his mind is still that dark, gray wasteland that Wonderland has become after Alice left. And in actuality, Wonderland has returned to that old, glorious place it once was. It became a land of prosperity, became a land of dreams, it became essentially what the typical fairy tale, what's it called, kingdom, I suppose, would be. But he's suffering through that, and he thinks if without Alice that there is no Wonderland. So Alice, in his mind, has to stay in order for Wonderland to become a prosperity again. Only then will he realize that Wonderland has been saved the whole time, but unfortunately, in his mind, with his schizophrenia, now his increased rage, as Alice refuses, or as you, the listener, would refuse to stay in Wonderland, he sees having to take these horrible physical disciplinary traits to try and force you to stay. So he stays not only because he loves you and he wants to care about you, but he sees you as the key to save Wonderland from its death and decaying ways. So that's the story of Hatter. And eventually in the comeuppance, if you haven't seen the final part, I'll put a link to the actual playlist of the Mad Hatter in the description just so you guys can hear the whole story. And this is going to be a quick spoiler warning if you haven't, but ultimately in the finale, you put Hatter out of his misery. And I understand that Hatter's finale was a little bit rushed because each one of those ASMRs was only about 5 minutes long, but I was just starting to learn how to do ASMR. I mean, I still am, that's why I'm not very good at it. So part 1 was the introduction of the stasis, and then through there was the trigger, which built up the story, and then the quest was for you to escape and also for Hatter to get comeuppance. And then eventually the climax of that was you ultimately having to put Hatter out of his misery by cutting his head off. Yeah, and also technically I did 5 individual characters, considering that the Hatter, not the Hatter, excuse me, the Cheshire Cat was involved, but it's just I probably could have utilized him a little bit more, because he only showed up at the very end of part 3, and he was killed at the end of part 4. So again, that's a spoiler if you haven't seen the series. I'll try and put a link to the Yandere Hatter playlist in the description if you want to see that. But that character, pretty much the only honest reason that Cheshire was there was because I wanted to, first of all, I want to impress you guys that I could do just more than one of this character, and also because Chess is trying to be Hatter's voice of reason, and he can't quite get through to him. Because of that, Hatter eventually breaks, and as Chess helps you run away, the Hatter kills Chess, because he thinks Chess is trying to keep Wonderland as this dead and rotting place that it once was. So, in the long short of it, Mad Hatter in my ASMRs, he is Yandere, and he does obviously love and care about you, but at the same time he also plays sort of a victim in his own right, because he's suffering from this schizophrenia and he can't tell what is real and what is not. So in his mind, if you leave, there is no Wonderland, and he feels that you need to stay in order to save it. So ultimately you put him out of his misery. So it's sort of like a bittersweet send-off. It's kind of like when you have to put down a pet, and that's not exactly a very fitting thing to compare it to, but when you ultimately think about it, he was at the point where you couldn't save him. Not even your love at this point could probably save him. So you had to do what you had to do in order to save yourself, and ultimately to stop his madness you had to cut the head off the snake, as they say. So that's the origin story of Hatter. The story of Rougarou is very similar in the fact that he sees you as a saving grace, but he sees you in a very different sense. Like, it's a lot more personal to him. So Rougarou, the story behind him is, and this is in real life, Rougarou is a Native American wolf god who's bent on evil and destruction. And I honestly was thinking of a name for this werewolf character, because I like to give them names with a little more personality than a typical Yandere is, because Yandere werewolves have been done before. Like, there's nothing original about a Yandere werewolf ASMR video, but giving him a character and giving him a lot more reasoning for doing what he does, I feel like it makes him, yeah, he's the antagonist, but at the same time you sympathize with him because you can understand why he needs you so much. So the story of Rougarou starts with his people, because his people are what drive him into this state. Like, he's been forced into becoming this Yandere character. So his people, these ancient werewolf people who are Native American descent, they live in the mountains, like in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. And I wanted to choose New York because New York's my home state, and I just thought it would be cool. And I am 1/8 Cherokee Native. You might not know that, but you probably don't care. But the more you know, you know. So the story with him is that early European settlers came to America, and their expansion have forced his people to quote-unquote savagery, as the settlers would say, because as they would expand, they were overhunting the area, and all of the resources that were once under his people's territory have been stripped away by European settlers. And so they had no food on their land, so they were forced to hunt down humans who were off in the woods doing their own hunting. So in essence, the story of werewolves eating humans was forced upon them by this there's a word on the tip of my tongue, but I can't. Anyway, they were forced into this situation by early settlers, and they're just trying to make the best of the situation. Like, they didn't ask to become these savages like this. They were forced upon that because their land was stripped of all its natural resources by early human settlers. And because of this, early European settlers started a war with these werewolf people. So Rougarou's entire people, like his whole race, has been singly been eliminated over the course of centuries. And basically Rougarou's the lone wolf now, no pun intended, but he's alone and he doesn't want to be alone anymore. So if you haven't seen it, go to the channel and you can find part 1 to the series of Rougarou, the Yandere werewolf. And you know that he speaks a different language, and that language was actually, I used that from Far Cry Primal. So I would listen to the script and I would try and voice act it as good as I could. And yeah, I guess that means I was necessarily like taking from a game and trying to turn it into something, but I just thought it would be fun to give his werewolf side and his human side a different tone. His werewolf side has his native tongue, so he speaks in this Wenja language, as it's known, or as in the series he speaks Wolfa, which is pretty much just now what they're called in Far Cry Primal. They're just called Wolf. It's a Wolf or something. So he speaks that in werewolf tone, but in his human tone he can speak very easy English. And the day he sees you hunting in the woods, the listener, he sees in you the passion of hunting and the fire of a warrior that reminds him of his people. So he sees you as someone who can not only help him finally not be alone anymore, but he sees you as one of his people. And he wants you to become one of him because he doesn't basically want to let his people become an urban legend, a mere myth, as they have over the past centuries. So yeah, and as you've heard in part 3, if you haven't watched part 3, I do guess I recommend it because it's not good, but I think it shows Rougarou's human side. Because if you notice part 1 and 2, they start with Rougarou speaking in his werewolf tone, where the human, as in part 2 of that series, he says it brings out the human in him, like you bring out the man in him, and he likes that, and the man in him wants to be better, but he needs you to be there in order to do that. Without you there, he sees himself still as a savage beast, and he does want to take revenge on humans for what they've done, but if he does it by himself, he's obviously going to have trouble. So basically, he's turned Yandere because he does see something in you, and he does love you, and he wants to be with you, but he sees you as a saving grace not only for him, but the person who can save his people from extinction and just becoming an urban myth among humanity. And I'm sorry you hear such long pauses in between when I talk sometimes. It's because I have asthma, so sometimes when I record and you hear me in the ASMR videos, there's long pauses just like that where I have to take a quick breath because having asthma is not a very good thing to do. Yeah. So that's pretty much what Rougarou is. Did I miss anything? Let's see. Talked about his people, what happened. I think I've got it all covered. So basically, yeah, they both Hatter and Rougarou see you as a saving grace for them, and also for a bigger cause. It's not just because they're obsessed with you and they love you, which they do. Trust me, they do. You do, guys? Yeah, they say they do. Yeah, they see you as the key to saving them and where they are, because Hatter sees you as his true love and as the savior of Wonderland, who will save Wonderland from this wasteland. And Rougarou sees you as the love of his life and sees you as the key to save his entire people. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'm sorry that I'm still a little bit sick, but I do hope to see you guys a little later. EagleOwl-Hunter, signing off.